Afternoon. We're going to continue with the hearing and continue with Mr. Reid's testimony. And proceed, Mr. Reid.
Where I left off, I was talking about the fact that I trusted the Department of Education's advertisements for new hires to come to the state of Hawaii. It was my CU 17. And how I read this, and I trusted, I made financial decisions based upon this document. And this document told me that I would get credit for 6 years of prior experience. And in my entire teaching experience, I've never heard of the experience being taken away once given. I sold my house at a loss. I sold my car for a loss. I gave away everything I had acquired over 10 years of being a functioning adult. What I couldn't sell, I gave away, and what I could sell was not for much. And I did that because I had the promise that I would be paid in accordance to what this advertisement is, which is that we will give you credit for 6 years of prior experience. And it never once crossed my mind that it could be taken away. In this profession, I've never, ever heard of experience that was once given credit for all of a sudden going away. Never have I heard that happening. And I made financial decisions based on that advertisement. Let's talk about SB 2819, which in its final form is Act 1, it's CU 09, Act 146, which is about 68, where does it begin? About 60, the text of the act begins at 64. So the legislative summary, where the summary of this act says it's supposed to promote teacher equality. This act does the opposite. Well, I don't want to say that. Anyways, the repeal of 302A-627 directly, well, it takes away, sorry, let me go back and see if I got this letter first. Got ahead of myself, which is sorry, CU 16. Which is C87.
What page again?
87.
Thank you.
This states that, well, can I read the quote?
Go ahead.
It says, instead, to accomplish the intent of this measure, the department recommends repealing section 302A-627A. Hawaii Revised statutes, which states in part, quote, so that the salary rating shall be equal to the salary ratings held by incumbent teachers in the department with the identical number of years of experience, end quote. That was the stricken part. What this does is it takes away the legal need to respect those 6 years when you come and go from the Department of Education, which is aside, which is the only place where those years are, but it's been, through my research, it's the only place I have found where those 6 years are protected by state law. And the intent of repricing I don't understand how the intent of repricing requires the deletion of rights. The deletion of rights from law that protected the 6 years that was advertised to me when I initially applied and looked for employment. I have not found any, in my research, I have not found any part of Chapter 89 that conflicts with any part of 3828-627. The intention of repricing isn't made clear in this document. We'll get to that later. But that, based on my reading and research, that repeal has nothing to do with promoting equality. Now we're going to go back to Act 146, which I think was 87, 78, or not to check. Oh, 60. Check. 63. June 27, 146. 64, 65. This no longer funds. This no longer funds a compression fix. It no longer has anything to do with the compression fix at this point. It doesn't authorize anything. It doesn't allocate money for anything. It basically removes a notice of Class 7. It just removes a mention. It doesn't really, there was no language beforehand which made Class 7 the top, but it removes a mention of Class 7, and it removes a mention of those prior 6 years of experience. And that's all it does. That's it. It removed the rights that I depended on. It was in the law when I came here. And the intention of repricing required, the letter says the intention of repricing requires the law to change. And me personally, if I want to do something that requires a law to be repealed, doesn't appear to be legal to begin with. I'm not saying they broke the law because they repealed the law, but the intention of repricing, as stated in that letter, did not appear to be congruent with the law that was written at the time. I want to talk about 89.3, which states, no, it's not in this one. States the employee, can I have my copy of 89?
Mr. Reid, you're gonna be reading from a copy of
Just the
HRS chapter 89.
just like 6 words. Employees shall have the right of self-organization. That's the first part of that sentence. I have the right to have an organization. And that right, the entire chapter 89 becomes illusionary if that organization isn't expected to do the right thing, if they're not expected to follow the law. And our rights to have that organization do the right thing were interfered with when the state repriced illegally. Well, I don't know if to say that. When the state repriced under F2, that I guess I'm testifying. I find it to be that they made the choice not to engage in collective bargaining when the law was very clear. Based on the evidence that has been submitted, based on the fact that clearly repricing was a long time lobbying effort by the Hawaii State Teachers Association, and the state had to have known that. They did know that. They say it in the very first in the DOE memo dated January 16th, that the response to concerns by HSTA. They requested a compression fix. They got repricing. They asked for it. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. They asked for repricing. And F1 should have been used. There's complete lack of evidence that I've found. I'm not aware of any evidence that states that F2 should have been used. And that decision by the state to have sidestepped collective bargaining interfered with my right to collective bargaining, or to form, or to have an exclusive representative. Because what good is the exclusive representative if the state can just decide, we're not going to do that? And I have not seen any evidence, I don't know everything, but I have seen no evidence conditions for 89.9 F2 were met. I have seen much evidence that the requirements for 89.9 F1 were met at the request of the exclusive representative. It's that simple. It's that simple. And I have, and once we get past that, nothing else holds up. Nothing else holds up. They did not have the power to take away the 6 years without the approval of the HSTA. Without that, they didn't have the approval to give step movements, because the contract says no step movements. Without approval from the union, a repricing under 89.9 F1 requires the union to put their approval, to at least negotiate and make their stance known. And for some reason, that didn't happen. I want to talk about the definition of wages. It has been made clear to me that movement within the steps is included in the definition of wages. Movement up the steps is the intent. Movement up the steps is included in the definition of wages. The union, the state claims they did not modify the salary schedule, which is correct, but there is more to the definition of wages than that. That is the movement between steps. And that's what repricing is, movement between steps. I want to talk a little bit about what compression means to us as the complainants. Prior to coming here, prior to moving to the state of Hawaii, I taught for 9 years. I got credit for 6. I got placed on step 7, which is the legal maximum for prior experience. I then taught 5 years and received 1 step increase in 5 years, which is less than what the compression fix is, which is 1 step for every 2 years. So those 5 years down, I'm down a step from that. When my 6 years was transferred in, 6 years under the compression fix is 3 steps. But when I transferred in, I got a maximum of 2 steps, which puts me on 7. So I lose 1 step because the policy that limits my experience to 6 years, and the policy, and there's an additional policy which limits the maximum step placement to step 7 when you're hired, only exists because of the compression situation, which has been here for a long time. It's been unattractive for a long time. I'm glad it got fixed, partially, but because teachers here in the state of Hawaii were compressed, they passed laws and policies which made it fair for new people coming in not to jump over them. I understand that. But I say that because the claim has been made that we suffered no compression. That's the claim that was made. And the reality is my 9 years was trimmed to 6 because of laws that keep me down because of the situation, which sounds fair at the time. Then those 6 years are credited for 2 steps. What people had before me, so that's fine. So 9 years went down to 2 steps. And even if we ignore the 3 that I wish I could argue for, and I can't, there are the 6 years, which were worth 2 steps. Under the compression fix, that 6 years is worth 3 steps. That's 1 lost step. My 5 years I did have, I got 1 step in there, and that should have been worth 2 steps. So I lost 1 step to the compression that happened before me for the prior experience. And I'll lose the 1 step because 5 years, just 1 step. And that puts me, when the compression fix happened, at step 8, because I came in at 7 and got 1 step. And if you count, 6 + 5 is 11, and 11 years is worth 5 steps. You get 2 steps, so you get 2 years per step. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I should have been on step 10 when repricing happened, if those years were counted. And instead, I didn't move at all because they only counted my 5 years. They determined that would put me on step 7, which would be lower than my current step at the time, which was 8. So I didn't move. But my 9 years was cut to 6, and those 6 years were given the equivalent of the equivalent of 4 years under the compression plan. Under the compression plan, 4 years of experience is 2 steps. When I got hired, I got 2 steps for 6 years of experience. So we were absolutely compressed because the laws of the state and the policies and the contract impose compression upon every new hire with experience. I did not come in here and get, with my 9 years of experience, that's 2, 4, 6, 8. I did not come in on step 6, 7, 8, 9. I did not get hired at step 9. I did not get full credit for my prior experience. I got 2 steps, which is the equivalent of 4 years of experience in the replacing plan when I was hired. I was compressed. I taught during COVID, where there were no step increases. When I was hired in 2017, incumbent teachers got a step. If you were working the last day of the prior school year, you got a step the first day of 2017, but because I wasn't working for the DOE on the last day of the prior school year, I did not get the step issued in 2017. And which is another issue, but not for this situation. So I am absolutely compressed. I've been teaching, I think, I always forget not to count my year of long-term subbing, 16 years. I am on the same step as somebody who has been teaching for, well, at the time of repricing, someone who had been teaching for 6 years. And that is the definition of the problem they were trying to solve. The state knew exactly how many years of experience I had. No need to verify what's already been submitted. Actually, it's an exhibit. In if we look at the employer exhibit that has my information in it. I can get a table of contents with theirs. Oh, here we go. Not me. Let's see. The state absolutely knows how much experience I have No need to research it because it is exhibit number. Here we go. It is E38. It is E39. And the state need not research what they have in their files. This is my proper employment history. 8 years with the Charleston County School District in Charleston, South Carolina, and 1 year with the Obion County School District in Obion County, Tennessee. It's there. They brought it with them. And it's also the same employment history for both of the other complainants. It's there. No need to research or look it up. It's present. The DOE accepted those 6 years, and they did not ask how much money I made during those 6 years. There's no place on that form that asks for salaries. Department of Education did not appear concerned with how much money I made. They didn't ask. They gave me credit for those 6 years without regard to whether I made a penny or $1 million. And what I've been told, well, the reason that have been said in this hearing room today is they didn't have any control over my salary for those 6 years. Therefore, those 6 years don't count now. But it didn't matter when I got hired. And it matters now. I got credit for 6 years when I got hired. Millionaire or broke. Why the Department of Education didn't care. And then it's time to pass out raises based on repricing. And all of a sudden, because of a factor that never was a factor before, a factor now. That's what I've been told. Article 25 speaks to rights, privileges, and benefits of employment. I have researched for a year. I have found one reference to what a right, privilege, and benefit of employment is. And it's in a USERRA, which is Title 38. There's a section 4303, which states any gain, status, interest, lists a lot of things. Any gain or any status is a right or benefit of employment. And under that definition, I have looked in Hawaii revised statutes. I have not found any definition for what a right, benefit, or privilege of employment is. I have looked to the best of my and Google's ability, and I have not found any other concrete reference as to what that means. And by that definition, any gain or status. I gained credit for those 6 years in the salary system, like what CU 17 says, credit for prior experience. I gained a credit for prior experience for salary purposes, not retirement, for salary purposes. I gained a status equal to an incumbent with 6 years. Kind of. I say kind of because they got a step the first day I was there and I didn't. But over the summer, when I was hired, my status was equal to them before the first year of school. Sorry, before the first day of school. I obtained a status equal to an incumbent teacher with 6 years in compliance with Article 20E. I gained that status. That status has been taken away. Those 6 years were not an issue to count in the beginning. They're an issue now. Question I'd like an answer to. I'll ask it. But this is what's happened. I've been teaching 16 years. I was placed equal to somebody with 7. And that's why we're here today. That is why we are here today. And while I'm up here, the part about the the merit principle, we're not asking for back pay for the years that we weren't here. We are saying the labor that I provided 2 days ago on Friday. I provided labor 2 days ago for the Hawaii Department of Education. Experienced labor. And that labor deserves equal treatment to the labor of other experienced teachers. This is not about the labor that I did before I came here. Our value as teachers are in education and experience. That's how the industry works. And we were not asking for back pay for labor we did prior to being employed. I worked last week. I'm assuming they worked last week. We worked last week. That labor is experienced labor and should be treated under the merit principle equal to the experienced labor of other teachers who had all of their experience here, or at least up to the 6 equivalent plus 6 prior years. And that's been a major that's been a very hard twist of what we've said. It's never been about what we did before. We worked 2 days ago. I've been here. I've taught in the Hawaii Department of Education for 6.5 years, plus a few weeks. That labor deserves equal treatment as other similarly experienced labor. And yes, I did that labor for the past 6.5 years as a member of bargaining unit 5. That was DOE BU 5 labor. A lot of things to say. That's all for now.
Mr. Reid. Mr. Takei, cross-examination.
No questions. Also, the same. Mr. Reid is scheduled as one of my witnesses as well. So at this point, I have no questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Alapa.
I have a couple. Remy,
Yes, please.
Mr. Reid, we went through some facts that referenced the EMP. You remember talking about that?
Yes.
And let me get to that page. When you talked about allocations of money for that EMP. You know, we're talking about that.
Yes.
And if you turn to C0017, for example, let me know when you get there.
I'm there.
The part where there's a dollar sign and where the allocated money is supposed to be, there's a blank. Is that correct?
That's what I see.
There's no money allocated to the EMP, yes? As far as you know?
As not proposed, there is no proposed number there.
But there's no money allocated at any point to the EMP program, correct? As far as you know?
There's no number there.
As far as you know, do you know if money was allocated to the EMP program? If you don't know, you can say you don't know. I'm asking if you know whether money was allocated to the EMP program.
I'm not a part of the making of this, but to the best of my knowledge, an EMP never actually took place and there was no money allocated to it.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to know. And this particular bill and the bills referencing the EMP, they never actually passed into law, as far as you know.
Correct.
And you understand that the legislature is not the employer?
Yes,
Is, if you can clarify for me, is the EMP that's something that you wanted and that you advocate for as you sit here today?
the EMP as they were drafting it, no, because it didn't include me.
Okay, because you spent a lot of time on the EMP, so is the EMP, these bills that reference the EMP, is that something that you're against also? Or is that something that you could have supported, because you spent a lot of time on it?
Yeah, so I is asking if I was for or against an EMP. Is that your question? Was that for?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand why you spent so much time on the EMP and the bills that were proposed for it. Is that something that you would have supported?
Well, there were two questions there. Why did I spend so much time on it? And then what?
No, that's not my question. I'm giving you context.
Okay.
You asked for clarification.
Yeah.
I'm giving you context. You spent a lot of time on the EMP and these bills. My question to you for clarification, is this something that you supported?
I support anybody getting a raise in my profession. So yes.
Okay. And you understood that the EMP plan that was proposed by then Superintendent Kishimoto was a plan that was a discretionary decision by the employer that did not include negotiations. Did you understand that? That was the plan?
Yes, from reading the memos.
You referenced exhibit marked as C0088. In particular, the section that says prior experience credit.
Yes.
And in your testimony today is that you relied on this section here when you accepted the job to become a teacher. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when were you hired by the DOE?
2017.
Okay, if you look to the right side of this document, in the middle, it says effective school year 2022 to 2023. Is that did I read that correctly?
It's the same text.
Oh, no, that's not what I'm.
But yes.
No, that's not what I'm asking you. We have this in evidence. This says effective year 2022 to 2023. Is that correct?
Yes, it does.
Okay, and you weren't hired in 2022, 2023, correct?
Correct.
You testified that when you were hired, was it 2017?
Yes.
When you were hired in 2017, you're offered and given 2 steps for 6 years of experience. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when you accepted the job, you understood that you were getting 2 steps for 6 years of experience, correct?
I understood I was being placed equal to somebody who had been teaching for 6 years prior to the.
Okay, that's not what I'm asking. And I understand how they got to that point, but the terms of employment, was your understanding when you accepted the job that you are going to get 2 steps for 6 years of experience? Was that your understanding when you accepted the job?
That was a part of my understanding, yes.
Did anyone promise you, and I'd like to know who, if anyone, that you would receive any compression fix that's ever determined in the future? Was that promised to you in those words?
When I was hired?
Yes.
No.
You testified that you were in South Carolina and Tennessee between 2008 and 2017, and you're a teacher there. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the DOE does not have any control over the employers that you had there, correct?
Correct.
They didn't control the curriculum.
Correct.
They didn't control the teacher training that they had there. Yes.
Correct.
As far as you know, the DOE and the issues with salaries and funding that they experienced, for example, between 2009 and 2013, that was something that was also experienced there in the same way, as far as you know?
I did not receive raises every year. The budget, funding is stressful all over the country.
It's not. The salary compressions that occurred in 2009 and 2013, and you heard testimony about it coming before the board. There's a fight between HSTA and the employer. That applied only to the DOE. It wasn't applying to the Department of Education or your employers in South Carolina or Tennessee. Is that correct?
I understand that budget issues are universal.
I'm not talking about universal budget issues. I'm talking about this specific issue with the budget in Hawaii. For 2009, 2013, you heard the testimony about the issues they were dealing with. That applied to the DOE in the state of Hawaii, not to South Carolina and Tennessee, where you are. Yes?
Yeah, every state has their own individual issues. Yes, they're separate.
And during that time period, 2009 to 2013, you weren't providing DOE Hawaii labor, right? You weren't providing BU5 labor as you called it, correct?
Right.
Were you aware that collective bargaining includes consultations as well as negotiations? Did you know that that was a part of collective bargaining?
I have read 89.9. Yes.
Is a yes?
Yes, I understand.
And do you understand that there's limits to the scope of what must be negotiated? You understand that?
Yes, scope of negotiations. 89.9.
Okay, and there's subjects that cannot be negotiated. There's subjects that are cannot be agreed to, management rights. You understand all of that?
Do I understand all of that? No, I definitely don't. I'm a band teacher. I don't delve into this very often.
Okay, and I'm just asking, I'm not saying that you should know it. I'm just trying to find out what extent do you know collective bargaining covers? And that's all I'm asking. There's no question. I just want to clarify that for you. Prior to the implementation of the employer's compression fix, you were at step 8 in the salary schedule.
Prior to compression fix, yes, I was on it.
And after the implementation, the employer's compression fix, you're still at step 8, yes?
At that time, I was still on step 8, yes.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alapa. Mr. Reid, is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah.
That's the question you were asked.
The text on C, it was an oversight on my part. I've done my best to be as diligent as I can. But the C008 and without pulling them out side by side, a cursory reading of E0036, which is from effective school year 17-18, and the one I previously read from appear to be exact copies of each other.
Sorry, what is the reference?
E0036 and CU17. I'd have to pull them out side by side. But
CU17.
if not exact copies, the message was identical.
Sorry, E, what is the E?
E0036. I fully stand behind my testimony that I relied on that. Kind of fuzzy.
So Mr. B, that's E0036 is teacher salary schedule entry level for new employees effective school year 2017-2018. Is that the document you're from?
Yeah,
Okay.
the paragraph
Thank you.
1, 2, 3, 4, that's its experience credit.
Thank you.
Apologize for pointing to the wrong document. The only redirect I have about that. Mhm.
Again, Mr. Takei, you're in the reserve.
No, no questions at this time.
Mr. Alapa,
I can have just 30
Sure.
seconds.
good time.
Let me just real quick. E 30, I got a whole bunch of these numbers. 37, which is RE 5003. That's the table, teacher salary schedule, yes,
Yes,
from the 2017 negotiations.
I can only assume.
Well, does it say,
Um,
no, well, let me ask it a different way. For the effective school year 17-18.
yes,
And then the one you were referring to earlier has a different salary schedule for the 2022-23 school year, yes?
I can only imagine that the numbers have changed between those years.
The years, the number and everything, yes?
Everything, no.
Well, the years and the numbers.
The content that I didn't testify about changed, yes.
No, the years and the numbers changed, did it? Or did it not?
Excuse me, am I allowed to, I cannot speak to Mr. Reid to ask input or to ask him to ask a question? Is there anything I can do?
And when we first started,
We said I could talk to Mr. Reid, and if
Yes.
I had an objection, then he would object, but I'm
you want
unable
to speak,
to.
do you want to speak to Mr. Reid?
I do.
We'll take a short recess. You can confer.
Did very short.
Can I get the question again?
Rolling.
Or, sorry.
Back on the record. Mr. Reid,
Can I get the question again?
The years and the numbers in these tables are different, correct?
I object to the question because this is not a part of my original testimony. I didn't talk about numbers. I didn't talk about tables. I didn't talk about dollar amounts. Objection because this is outside the scope of my original testimony.
Am I referencing the exact documents you talked about?
yeah, Mr. Reid, yeah, these documents were referred to, they're all part of the same. Allow the question.
Did the numbers change?
Numbers and years.
Yes.
And on both of these documents, it states that this pertains to the initial salary classification. It uses the word initial, correct?
No.
Okay, turn to the 2017 version E0037.
37.
Okay, if you look under the table, this says note requirements for initial salary classification must be met prior to the effective date of employment. It references the word initial, yes?
I was initially hired and I was put on.
Does it reference the word initial or
Do I
not?
get to answer my
No,
question?
I'm asking you this question.
I
Stop.
Hold
Does
on.
it reference the word initial, yes or no?
Do you understand the question, Mr. Reid, or you want to read?
I understand the question.
You can go ahead and answer.
The word initial does appear on the paper.
That's all I was asking. Thank you.
Is that the end? Or can
That's all I
I?
have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Reid, anything further?
Just one quick thing. The part of this paper that I was talking about was the experience credit, which has an identical message and meaning and presentation on E36 and CU17, the one I erroneously pointed to. Everybody, when they're hired, is an initial hire. I think that's a fair statement. Anytime you're hired, you're an initial hire. It's a rather redundant word that doesn't have to be there. When you're hired, you're an initial hire. Nowhere on this paper that I've read does it say exclusively in the experience credit section of E0036, does it say this is only to be used for initial placement? And actually, under experience credit, the word initial does not appear. It says I get credit for I get experience for salary credit up to a maximum of 6 years. That's what it says. The word initial isn't there. There's no limiting language in that paragraph. There is nothing that would lead anybody to believe that experience credit was temporary. Yes, I did point to the wrong document in my initial testimony. I apologize for that. But it doesn't change anything that I've said. It doesn't change anything. There's also no mention on this paper that during repricing, it gets taken away. No mention that it's there. There's no mention that it's not there. And no more.
Let's see if members of the board have questions. Board member Moipono. You're on mute.
I'm sorry. No, I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Chair O'Shea.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Mr. Reid, I have no questions. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Reid, who will be your next witness?
I'd like to call Mr. Bacon.
If it's okay if you sit down, bring him in. Good afternoon, Mr. Bacon.
Good afternoon.
Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you please state and spell your first and last name for the record?
Sean Bacon, SEANBACON.
Thank you. Mr. Reid?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you describe your background in working with human resources and your education, your work history for us briefly?
Sure. So originally started back with the department in 2001 as a teacher. Was an elementary teacher for 3 or 4 years before I was a school guidance counselor. I eventually went through the department's administrator training program and became a vice principal at a middle school on the Big Island. Following that, I became a school principal. And in 2011, I moved from the Big Island to Oahu to join the human resources team to begin with recruitment. I've been in human resources or talent management since 2011 in either recruitment capacity or the recruitment administrator to oversee all of our recruitment sections. I also was the executive assistant to oversee our previous assistant superintendent. And when the previous assistant superintendent left in May of 2021, I was asked to be the interim assistant superintendent for the Office of Talent Management. And last year in December of 2022, I was officially appointed by the Board of Education into the position.
And what was your role in developing the compression fix?
So the role that I played in developing it was, this has been an ongoing issue for many years, is trying to recruit and retain employees into the department. Yeah, many years ago or several years ago, the HSTA had proposed that possibly one fix that we could maybe look at is doing a compression adjustment, because I think from about 2008, 2009, there was a dip in the economy and we hadn't seen step increases for teachers for quite some time. And we had noticed that there had been a stack of teachers that were basically on the same step, and we wanted to see what we could do to try to make some adjustments to that moving forward.
Are you saying that the HSTA let you know that you could maybe possibly consider solving this problem? Was that the language they used, similar kinds of language?
I think it was a collaborative effort between both the HSTA and the department for us to work together to see how we could work on addressing the teacher shortage with recruitment and retention. And I think this was one of the options that was considered by both sides.
You mean repricing?
Correct.
But my question was, when the HSTA presented their concerns to you, did they use such conditional and weak language, such as something you could, I can't exactly quote you that, I didn't write it down, but you said something to the effect of could possibly maybe? Is that how it was presented to you?
Hold on, Mr. Bacon.
Objection argumentative, putting the terms weak. You can just ask the question.
Or
It's argumentative.
Conditional.
Yeah, just
Sorry.
ask the question, Mr. Reid.
Did they use those words? Those exact words?
I don't recall the exact words that were brought up when the conversation originally initiated.
So who do you report to with regards to the compression fix?
Currently, right now, my direct supervisor is Keith Hayashi, superintendent.
And were you the primary, were you the focal point of the DOE's efforts to create the compression fix? Supervisor,
Not sure I understand your question.
were the people working under you the people who were actively collaborating with and formulating the compression fix?
Yeah, so it was myself and some of our recruitment team in the Office of Talent Management that worked together to try to address this issue, yes.
In 2019, around the time of the December Board of Education memo, was the DOE actively considering repricing?
The department was looking at repricing, also differentials. There were a few different things that we were looking at to really see what we could do to address our recruitment and retention issues for our teachers.
Okay. So month later, January 2020 BOE meeting. This would be exhibit CU02.
Mr. Reid, I think you're referring to C0009.
Oh.
The upper right-hand corner.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Is there any documentation that repricing was being considered around January 16, 2020?
So what we were looking at that point was really, it talked about, we were looking at doing just, what's the word I want to use? The experimental modernization to address equity and compression.
Okay. Since your department has worked through the issue, and you chose repricing in 2022, why didn't you choose repricing in 2020 when you had both of them on your mind?
I know that the, Superintendent Kishimoto at that time, was looking at experimental modernization as an opportunity to really look at this. It did at some point change to repricing, but I don't know exactly when and why it did change to that.
Do you have written documentation of established procedures to review the repricing of classes as described by 899 F2?
So for 899 F2, it does talk about reviewing on a 5-year basis. Typically, when we do have time at the table with collective bargaining, of some of the things that are talked about during that time are salaries for teachers, and looking at how teachers are compensated. So I think that every time that we come around through negotiations, through the collective bargaining process, I think that is definitely always something that is a topic that is discussed.
Yes, but my question was about the establishment of procedures. Do you have any written procedures or established procedures as an employee? Do you have any written procedures to expressly see what I want to expressly accomplish? Sorry, my brain got told. Do you have any procedures to expressly fulfill the requirement in 899 F2?
Yes, Mr.
Because he's referencing a statute, may Mr. Bacon have an opportunity to view the statute, the language itself, so he is clear on what exactly he's being asked about?
Yes, you have you can provide Mr. Bacon with a copy.
It's the same.
Yeah, then you do it for. It's fine.
This is the F2 statute, the language, if you want to take a look and read it.
Just let us know when you're ready to proceed, Mr. Bacon.
Okay.
Sir,
A question again.
you can proceed.
Do you have any written procedures to address the establishment that would come from these? Sorry. Do you have any written procedures that would fulfill the requirement in 899 F2?
I think part of the collective bargaining process always talks about addressing compensation. And I think that every time that we do meet at the table with the HSTA, I think compensation is something that is brought up every time that we went to the table to talk about it.
It says the employer shall ensure the establishment of procedures. As are your procedures usually just word of mouth?
I think collective bargaining and negotiations is a confidential process, but when the team typically meets, that has always been something from my experience that has been talked about is, teacher compensation and how we can best address our teacher shortage as we move forward with it.
I want to lay some foundation for what established procedures in the Department of Education look like. Does the DOE, your department, have the policy to not write down established procedures?
There's nothing to my knowledge that we have something that says do not write down procedures.
Is it that the DOE's policy to write down the procedures and expectations for their employees?
I think, again, what I had mentioned earlier is that there is a process every time that we do go to the collective bargaining table. You know, the area of teacher compensation is constantly an area that we discuss. And I think it's something that's consistently reviewed every time that we come up and try to negotiate a new collective bargaining agreement.
On the Board of Education website, there's lots of policies publicly available. I myself am the recipient of a great many policies for the Department of Education. Do these established procedures exist in a written form within the department that specifically address repricing?
Again, as I've said previously, I think part of our process when we do go to the collective bargaining table is always something that is talked about, reviewed, considered on it every time that we do open up the contract and try to renegotiate something.
Approximately when did the Department of Education first notify the HSTA that prior experience would not be counted in repricing?
To my recollection, the Act 240 or Act 248 of the 2022 legislative session had passed. You know, there was a concept that was developed at that time, but there were still certain procedures and certain parts of it that still had not been worked out completely at that point of when it was going to be effective, when we were going to implement, and also talking about whether or not we were going to accept or not accept the outside bargaining unit 5 teaching experience. So that was discussed after Act 248 had passed.
And that's the legislative session usually happens in June when laws are signed. Is there is June an approximation of when those details were being worked out? June of 2022.
Approximately, I think that's when some of those discussions started, probably June or July, somewhere in that vicinity, I'm guessing.
And was that request made to the Department of Education to include those 6 years from the Hawaii State Teachers Association?
I think it was something that was brought up to the table, you know, for both sides to consider. And in the end, both sides did agree that we were not going to include the outside teaching experience as part of the compression adjustments.
What was the department's justification for not counting the 6 years of experience?
I think some of the things that were being thought about at that time is compression occurred for employees that were employed during that time of 2008 to 2018-19. It was for those employees that were employed with the department. They were not receiving the step increases due to the way that the negotiations had occurred. So the feeling was from the department that we didn't have control over outside teaching experience and how teachers were being compensated in other types of school districts outside of the department. So since we didn't have control over what was happening for teachers in their compensation outside of the department, we chose not to move forward with accepting that credit.
Question. Was the department concerned with prior compensation, 6 years of credit, when the department hires people initially?
Can you clarify your question? Where are we
Um,
concerned?
Does the department take into consideration how much money a new hire made for those in their prior experience when choosing to give them credit for their prior experience?
So when we choose to give them the credit for the prior experience, that is something that's already been, budgeted for the average cost of a teacher position. So what we do is we do the evaluation. We look to determine up to 6 years of service credit that individuals have to determine that initial placement on the salary schedule.
Yeah, but my question, well, I guess it kind of, well, but the money was there. The money is there for initial hires, 6 prior years of experience, correct?
That is when the department has its base budgeting and does the average cost of a teacher when a school buys it through the weighted student formula. That those costs are already incorporated into the cost of a teacher when the school purchases a position.
Has the department ever failed to give prior experience credit upon initial hire because of budget concerns?
Not to my knowledge.
How much did the compression fix cost as it was executed?
I'd have to look, is somewhere in the range of 50 to 55 million, somewhere from there. I don't have the exact number in front of me.
All right. Can we look at the budget bill? RU 4? It's on it.
That'll be U at the top.
Yeah.
It's U19 at the top.
Oh, sorry. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
In the middle, what's the dollar amount that is provided out of the general fund appropriation for school-based budgeting? What is the dollar amount?
The sum of $121,702,128.
Or so much thereof maybe necessary for fiscal shall be expended for repricing. Just off my guesstimation math, it costs about $50 billion, 121 there. That leaves, how much money does that leave left over? Approximately.
Well, part of this 121 million did not only cover repricing, but it did cover other costs also.
Such as?
I believe it was either the 21 hours or the differentials, one of the two. I can't remember off the top of my head.
And how much did that cost?
I think it was 13 or 14 million.
Did the DOE ever do a study or determine approximately how much it would cost to pay the people who had prior experience for their up to 6 years?
I don't believe a study was actually done on that, no.
So you're telling me you don't know how much it would have costed?
I don't have that number in front of me, no.
So is it your testimony that you don't know how much it would have costed, but you didn't have the money to pay for a cost you didn't know?
That's not what he said. Objection.
Sorry, let me rephrase that.
Please.
It's your testimony that you don't know how much it would have cost.
I don't have that number of how much it would have cost.
And is it your testimony that you didn't include the 6 years because you couldn't afford it? well, there was no money in the budget, I think was the words used.
Out of state teaching experience was not considered. Due to kind of what I had said earlier, the cost was not something that we had considered during that process.
So did the HSTA ask you to cover those 6 years at any point?
Again, as my previous testimony I said, I think that both the HSTA and the department had discussions on that. And it was agreed between both parties at the end that we were going to not consider the outside teaching experience.
And that is because of the only reason I've heard is we didn't budget the expense, we didn't have the money. Is that a fair thing to say?
Objection, he asked and answered.
So what I'm so
Just rephrase the question.
so did you deny the request without knowing how much it would cost?
Again, I think the department and the HSTA talked about this to determine whether or not we were going to incorporate the six years of outside teaching experience or not. However, in the end, both parties agreed that we were not going to include it. You know, cost was not something that was talked about during those discussions from my recollection.
The cost was not the reason. Was it your testimony that cost was not the reason the department said no to counting those 6 years?
I think the reason why the department and the union decided not to incorporate it is with our discussions, we had talked about that we did not have control of teachers' experience outside of the Department of Education. We didn't know whether or not teachers had received pay increases or did not receive pay increases during that time. You know, the intent with this compression adjustments was those employees that were employed during the time of all this didn't receive step increases. And the thing of it is if you were outside of the department, you could or could not have received increases, and we didn't have control or knowledge of that. So that is why we decided not to incorporate that into the plan.
You said a lot, but I didn't hear an answer to my direct question.
Can you repeat your question?
The question was, I believe, as my train interrupted, but but did you request? Oh, sorry. Thank you. Did you deny the request without knowing how much it would cost?
To my understanding, we did not price out to determine what it would cost or not cost to add the 6 years of experience or not.
Are you aware it is within the Hawaii statutes that no employee can be placed higher than step 7 upon initial employment?
Can you repeat your question?
And I at least in the school board code. Are you aware of a policy that prohibits initial placement being higher than step 7?
Yes, I believe there's two references of that. I think it's in the collective bargaining agreement, and I believe it's also in the school code.
Why does that school code exist?
I don't know. It's been there for quite some time. I'm not sure why it was originally placed there.
Does that school code exist because of the compression situation that has existed for decades here in the state of Hawaii and teacher salaries?
I don't know. I just know that it's been in the school code for quite some time.
Are you aware of why? Are you aware of why our prior experience is limited to 6 years?
It's limited to 6 years because that is what is currently in the school code and in the collective bargaining agreement.
Yes, but are you aware of the rationale for why it exists in those places?
Again, I'm not sure why it was placed that way.
You know what, we've been going for a while, Mr.
Okay.
Reid, excuse me. For a while. Why don't we take a 10-minute recess and come back at 3
Okay.
o'clock?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stand adjourned. Rolling. Back in the record. Mr. Reid, you can continue with your examination of Mr. Bacon.
So is it your testimony that you don't know why the policies exist to reduce prior experience?
Yes,
Are you the Department of Talent Management? So I'm sorry. Are you the head of the Department of Talent Management?
yes, the assistant superintendent oversees talent management.
And in colloquial terms, that's human resources.
Yes,
And are these are the policies that reduce prior experience part of your department?
they are part of the school code. And the school code, when there is an opportunity to change the process, we would have the ability to change parts of the school code. Typically, it involves a consultation with the appropriate unions in order to make changes to that.
But those policies are a part of your department.
The school code is a part of the Department of Education, yes.
Is it your position that teachers with prior experience are still receiving wages from their former employers?
Teachers that are hired with the Department of Education receive a paycheck that is from the Department of Education, not from a previous employer.
So it's your testimony that well, it's fair to say that you don't think that teachers with prior experience are still getting paid by their former employers.
I just want to object, vague and ambiguous as to prior experience. There's a difference between BU5 service experience and outside DOE experience. I'm not sure which one they're asking. A little confusing.
Please clarify.
Is it your position that teachers with prior outside of BU5 experience in a K-12 public accredited school are are still receiving wages from their former employer?
Employees, once they are hired by the department, are receiving their wages through the Hawaii Department of Education.
Would it surprise you to know that the policies that limit experience, would it surprise you to know that the policies that limit prior certified teaching experience to 6 years is a direct result of the compression situation that had been prevalent in this state?
Section Lex Foundation.
Missouri, if you lay some foundation or make some,
He's make some, sorry, say again.
can you lay a foundation with Mr. Bacon regarding this issue? You didn't cite to any type of document or anything or an exhibit, so. Can you lay some type of foundation with Mr. Bacon?
Yeah, I think this would be pointing attention. The Article 20 of the CBA limits prior experience to 6 years. Would it surprise you to know that is because of the compression, because of the compressed teacher salaries here in the state?
Well, the giving up to 6 years of experience is what the initial salary placement is, but then beyond the initial salary placement, typically it's those movements on the salary schedule are done through the collective bargaining process.
All right, move on. What is your understanding of what wages are?
Wages are the amount of compensation that an individual receives.
Are you aware of the Chapter 89 definition of wages?
I don't know if I know the exact definition off the top of my head.
You still have the Chapter 89 documents? Uh, 89.2.
Yes, Mr. Takei.
Objection. I renew my objection that there's no definition of wages under 89-2. I believe what the complainant is referring to is part of the definition of collective bargaining, but there's no definition of wages.
Yeah, Mr. Reid, that's correct under this section. So if you can rephrase your question. Because the section does start off with, for purposes of this definition, which refers to collective bargaining. So if you can just rephrase your question.
I'll get back to that. You said wages are the money people make, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you change the wages of the bargaining unit with repricing? Members of?
So we did not change at all the salary schedule. On the salary schedule, there is a class and a step. And on that class and step, the exact dollar amount on the class and step was not changed at all for anything on the salary schedule.
Did you change the amount of money paid to employees with the repricing action?
So we did move employees to different steps on the salary schedule, but we did not change the actual dollar amount in each step on the salary schedule.
So you changed the wages of employees based upon their prior BU5 service.
That is correct.
And that changed how much money they took home in their paychecks.
Yes.
Hmm. You said that that the department and the HSTA had conversations about including the prior 6 years. Is that correct?
Yes, we did.
Did the department? Well, you said both parties agreed not to do it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Agreed under the context of a consultation, productive conversation. What was the context of that agreement?
So we were working out the final portions of this, and one of the things that we needed to work through was the prior years of service or not. In the end, both parties did talk about it, had discussions on it, but in the end, both parties agreed not to include it in the overall decision.
So did this take place in an official negotiation?
No, it did not.
Did this take place in an official consultation?
The department and the HSTA, we did consult and we did talk through this before we just agreed how we were going to implement in this.
So this was done in consultation in accordance with chapter 89.
Yes, we did consult on it.
What were the terms that both parties agreed upon to not do it? Did it? That's vague. Maybe tomorrow question. Well, I'll say this. What was the department's initial position on the 6 years?
The department's initial position was not to give credit for those 6 years of service.
And what did the conversation, what was the HSTA's initial position?
I think at first, I think that HSTA was trying to advocate for possibly including it, but after we did talk through both sides of it, both parties did agree in the end not to include it.
And have you told us the entire conversation between the parties on this topic so far, or is there anything new to add?
Not that I can think of.
When repricing became the focal point of the compression fix, why did you choose 89.9 F2?
Again, I think it, in my previous testimony, I talked, we had originally started this out as experimental modernization project, but it did turn into 89.9. I don't know when that actual change occurred for that, but in the end, that's the statute that we ended up using.
But the question wasn't when, it was why. You addressed the times that it happened. I want to know why the department chose F2 instead of F1.
I don't know on that answer.
Are you aware that the HSTA has requested a compression fix that was solved by repricing?
Objection, it's confused on the question. He's making a representation of what HSTA said. I just don't understand what he's asking. I get clarification.
Saying,
Mr. Reid, go ahead.
are you aware?
No, respond to.
Oh, respond. I think it's very clear. I think it's been said in this room today numerous times that the HSTA has been long-term requesting this, and I'm just asking directly.
Yeah, I don't know if that was your question, so maybe you can just rephrase the question.
Yeah, and just a comment, if he's talking about requesting a fix to a compression, I got no objection to that. But if he's saying that HSTA was advocating for repricing from years ago, then I do have an objection to that representation.
I understand. So, Mr. Reid, you understand that?
I do, I understand now. Are you aware that the HSTA has been asking for a compression fix for a long time?
Yes, I am aware.
And you solved this fix with repricing, correct?
In the end, 89.9 F2 was what was implemented in order to fix the compression adjustment.
So the HSTA asked you to solve a problem, and your response was, "We'll reprice." Is that correct?
In the end, 89.9 F2 was the authority that was used in order to solve the problem.
89.9 F1 states at the request of the exclusive representative. Can you, we'll get to that in a second. Can you describe what repricing is?
So the repricing really, in simple terms, is the adjustment of wages for an individual.
Did the Hawaii State Teachers Association request that the state adjust the wages of the bargaining unit?
Can you say that again?
Has the HSTA made a request to the department to adjust the salaries of the bargaining unit? I'll be more clear. In the context of the compression fix, did the HSTA make a request to adjust salaries of the bargaining unit?
Objection, vague. May I explain?
Please.
The salaries are determined by multiple factors on the salary schedule, both step placement and class. If complainant can specify whether by salary he's talking about step placement or if he's talking about classes or both.
So
I'm referring to steps, not classes, steps.
thank you. You can proceed,
I'm going to ask it again with that clarification.
please.
Did the Hawaii State Teachers Association request salary step increases under the context of a compression fix?
As part of the compression fix, the discussions that we had with the Hawaii State Teachers Association talked about how we are going to fix this compression. Because step increases had not been given to employees over a multitude of time. So one of the solutions is to look at giving step increases to employees for basically what the formula was is every 2 years of bargaining unit 5 experience would equate for basically an additional step increase.
Yes, I understand the math, but math wasn't my question. What was your reason for not? What was your reason for not repricing under 89.9 F1?
Mr. Takei.
May Mr. Bacon have time to review F1? He's reviewed F2 so far, but F1 is a different provision that, with the board's approval, some time to look at it.
Mr. Bacon, you need time to review 89.9 F1.
Yes, please.
Let us know when you're ready.
Okay. I've reviewed F1.
Mr. Reid.
What was the department's? Why did the department not choose 89.9 F1 to reprice under?
So I think with our discussions with the Hawaii State Teachers Association, the parties agreed that there was going to be no changes at all to the actual salary schedules. The dollar amount in each of the different cells on each of the class and range was not going to be adjusted at all, along with there wasn't going to need to be any changes to the actual collective bargaining agreement. So therefore it was decided that collective bargaining was not needed in order to implement these changes.
Do you know what the collective bargaining agreement said with regards to step motions during the life of the CBA?
Well, the collective bargaining agreement, what's talked about in the collective bargaining agreement are all negotiated movements between the two parties. What occurred here was not negotiated movements between the two parties. This was a one-time initiated compression adjustment that the parties agreed to do to move forward.
The contract states there shall be no step movements in Article 20, notwithstanding paragraph J.
Mr. Reid, if you're going to cite that, can you point Mr. Bacon to that section?
I don't actually have a copy of with the section. I don't have a copy of the CBA in front of me.
Do you know what article it is?
Article 20.
Are you going to ask any more questions regarding this?
No.
All right, you can continue.
Article 20. Do you have all the paragraphs? Which paragraph is it? There are lots of paragraphs now, but Article 20 states that it is agreed upon that there shall be no.
I understand, Mr. Reid, but if you're going to cite to the collective bargaining agreement and the exact language, Mr. Bacon should have the opportunity to see it.
It says paragraph C.
You can read it to me. I have it in front of me. I can read it, but Mr. Bacon doesn't. I don't think.
May I approach the witness to give him?
Thank you, Mr. Takei.
Just correct. Article 20.
Article, section C.
Yeah.
Article 20, section C.
And Mr. Reid, just so it's clear, I'm not questioning your veracity in reading the section, but you would be reading it to me. Mr. Bacon doesn't have it.
Yeah.
That's not fair to him.
That's fine.
Mr. Bacon, go ahead and let us know when you're done reviewing. Article 20 is paragraph C.
Okay. Um. How many step movements are permitted under the CBA in the period between July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2023?
It states here, there shall be no step movements or annual increments during that period.
And were there step movements during that period?
There were no negotiated step movements during that period at all. There was no negotiated step movements during that time.
Were there non-negotiated step movements?
There were adjustments to individuals' steps based on the compression adjustments.
Uh, Senate Bill 2819. Are you aware of SB 2819 or Act 146? Do we call it Act 146? Or yeah. Are you aware of Act 146? It's CU 9, first section. Begins on C 65 or 64. Okay. Were you aware of the life of this act during the 2022 legislative session?
You mean life of the act?
Are you aware of the drafts, how the drafts changed? What was included, taken out? Are you aware of the life cycle of the bill?
Generally, yes.
So SB 20 Act 146 includes the repeal of 302A-627A. And based on letter CU 16, which is C 87. It says, well, the superintendent makes the testimony that the intent of repricing requires repealing 302A-627. Can you please explain the intent?
Objection, it doesn't say intent of repricing, it says intent of this measure.
My apologies. This measure is to accomplish what?
I think the overall measure is the intent of the bill was really to look at recruitment and retention of teachers. So what could we do to improve the recruitment and retention of teachers?
The Can you explain how the recruitment and retention of teachers was being use the right words? How the recruitment and retention of teachers, in order to accomplish that, the department recommended repealing 3028.627.
Okay, so recruitment and retention of teachers has been an ongoing, discussions, ongoing efforts between department, union, and the state to figure out what we can do to better close the gap of our teachers. So what our intent was, I think, with this language here is it talked about in 302A627A, it talks about initial placement for teachers.
It says incumbent teachers. With the top of C87, so that the salary rating shall be equal to the salary ratings held by incumbent teachers. I don't understand. Is it your testimony that repealing a requirement to recognize experience is going to improve teacher recruitment and retention?
So 302A627, that first section talks about salary ratings of entering or re-entering teachers. So that initial placement for teachers has always been a discussion that has been brought up. And we really wanted to look at what we can do to better handle recruitment and retention of teachers. And one of the things that we were considering here with this bill is to really look at if there were any barriers for us when it came down to negotiations at this point right now, that we wanted to look at trying to remove any of those barriers. And I think that, we had always talked about 6 years of service, a 1-for-1 type of credit that, teachers would get. And we were looking at this point right now in an effort to try to remove some of those barriers. We wanted to see what we could do to look at different opportunities in the future to figure out how we could give, credit to teachers coming into the department. And we wanted to make sure that we could remove any barriers so that when we did go to the table to discuss and negotiate, there would be a better opportunity for us to look at creative ideas moving forward.
So C68 has the full text of the stricken part of 302A.627A. I want to talk about that. So could you read that real quick?
Okay.
Does this law, or does this statute talk about how the department must treat prior experience when you're rehired?
So this section here, it talks about when teachers are entering or re-entering the department and they have more than 1 year of teaching experience. It talks about how the teacher's salary rating is determined.
And how was that a hindrance to future potential you said it was removed so that it would not be a hindrance. Explain, how was that a hindrance to your goals to recruit and retain?
Okay, so, we have talked about before about giving up to 6 years of service credit and all of that. But, moving forward here, we really wanted to see, were there unique opportunities? Were there ways that we could talk with the union to figure out, how could we give service credit moving forward. Maybe it didn't have to be a 1-for-1 year for service. But in order for us to have those discussions, be creative in some of the ways that we looked at giving service credit, we wanted to see if this would be an opportunity to remove some of this language so that for future discussions could occur, to see what we could do to better recruit and retain some of our teachers moving forward.
But I'm gonna flip flop between 69 or between 68 and 87 a bit. But it says the intent of this measure on 87, and was the intent of SB 20
What are you referring to?
C 87, the first paragraph. It says to accomplish the intent of this measure, they recommend repealing that. It doesn't say in order to accomplish the intent of future possibilities, we need to repeal this. It says in order to accomplish the intent of this measure, the department recommends repealing section. So I ask you again, what is the intent of this measure?
Objection, asked and answered.
Okay.
Mr. Bacon said that it was about recruitment and retention.
I'm gonna have to agree with Mr. Takei.
So-
Plus, I think it calls for speculation.
Okay. How does repricing impact recruitment?
So repricing was for employees that were employed with the department that did not receive step increases from approximately 2007, 2008 up until 2018 or so. So the repricing was intended for those currently employed.
Was it not your testimony that you just said the measure was to increase recruitment?
Again, it talked about at the beginning of that act, the whole act for this was talking about that the legislator found that recruitment and retention continued to be a challenge. You know, not only was repricing, you know, addressed in this, but there were other things that were also addressed in this bill.
Okay, so how was the repealing of that helping? Because here helping. Well, I'll ask it this way: did SB 2819 remove any hindrances to accepting prior experience?
Did it remove any hindrances prior? No, it still allows for the department to consider prior experience.
Does it allow for more than it did prior? So does it allow for 8 years, 9 years?
No, that has not changed at this point because that's still part of the collective bargaining agreement.
Does it, so how does repealing protections that pertain to prior experience entice somebody to want to work for you?
So as I indicated before, so that, you know, the 6 years of service and all of that is, you know, currently in the collective bargaining agreement. It is currently in school code. We've talked about in order to change school code, we typically have to consult with the unions on some of those changes. In order for us to have some of those discussions with the unions on either changing the collective bargaining agreement moving forward, changing the school code moving forward, we wanted to make sure that we could, in order to have productive conversations, if there were any barriers out there, we wanted to see what we could do to remove some of those barriers so that we could then in the future look at future discussions.
How does that repeal entice currently employed teachers with prior experience to want to work for you?
Can I ask for an offer of proof? So line of questioning is going into a legislative action. It was the legislature that changed the law. They submitted testimony, employer submitted testimony, they testified to that. Is this the claim that the law was changed and they're putting that on the employer and the union? So if I can have an offer of proof on the relevancy of this line of questioning.
And Mr. Reid,
This is relevant because the chief organization that the legislature will listen to here is the Department of Education. The head of the Department of Education has stated what was stated plainly right there. And all of everything that has, so we need to explore, part of this case isn't just what happened, but why. We have to prove, or we have to attempt to prove why it happened. We have to prove intention. We have to discuss animus. We have to prove what people were thinking. And this right here is from the head of the department stating the intent of this measure, which I believe we can is repricing with a compression fix. And the answers that have been given, well, I'm exploring the answers that have been given by Mr. Bacon. Mr. Bacon said it was for recruitment and retention, and I would like to explore exactly what that means.
I think you need to rephrase your questions, because if you're talking about explaining the intent of the measure, that's one thing. If you're getting into the legislative process, that's something completely different, outside the scope of this hearing. So I would ask you to keep your questions narrow to this measure and to Mr. Bacon's knowledge.
Narrow to the intent of the measure.
Well, I'm not telling you how to present
Yeah.
your case, but it's, if that's the objective of what you're trying to get at, then your questions should be narrowed towards that, and not so much what the legislature did or didn't do. If you're talking about the department and their position, that's one thing, or
Yeah,
the union's position.
yeah, I'm mainly asking about what the department's position is on how.
Well, why
It
don't
makes
you go
sense.
ahead and ask that question?
Okay. How did the department? How did the department come to the conclusion that retention would be? How did the department come to the conclusion that retention would be improved by repealing that section of law?
Objection asked and answered. Mr. Bacon testified that the intent of the measure, to DOE's understanding, was retention and recruitment. He's explained how removing this provision improves recruitment. And I believe he has he's answered the questions repeatedly, at least 2 times.
I'm going to overrule that objection. Continue, Mr. Reid.
You've discussed recruitment, but we're just discussing retention for the first time. How did the department come to the conclusion that repealing that section of law would increase retention?
I think sometimes recruitment and retention go hand in hand. So to begin with, again, if we were to be able to take down some of the barriers here so that we could have some productive discussions and creative discussions outside of the box thinking discussions sometimes with the union to see what we can do to ensure that we have a qualified teacher in our classrooms. That's what the intent of what we wanted to do here. If we were able to come up with a possible solution of giving even maybe more years of service than the 6 years of service, I mean, it would, I think, number one, possibly affect recruitment, but also number two, we may get more qualified teachers that want to stay in the classrooms here moving forward. So I think that it addresses both the recruitment and the retention issues.
Um, did the department anticipate legal issues with their repricing if they did not get that repeal?
No, we did not.
Did that repeal, or did the repealed section directly interfere with repricing?
The repealed section deals with initials placement. Repricing did not deal with initial placement.
Oh, now it came back to me. So you mentioned that it's your testimony that that section was repealed to enable future possibly productive, agreements.
That is correct.
In our latest negotiation, in the last contract negotiation with the Hawaii State Teachers Association, was there an opportunity to do something productive? But was there an opportunity to address this situation? I'll now have my full idea. With the last contract negotiation, was there an opportunity presented to improve retention of employees who had their prior experience not counted in repricing?
Was there a time during the negotiations where those that were not affected by the repricing were discussed in negotiations?
I'll be more clear. Did the union ask for prior experience to be counted in at least 6 years of prior experience in the last contract negotiation?
I'd have to go back and look at the proposals. I don't know off the top of my head right now.
Was it surprising to know that was in the negotiation? That was in the initial proposal? Is that the terminology? It was a part of the latest contract negotiations this was discussed according to lots of here. I don't have anything. I didn't anticipate that. This topic, would it surprise you that were you present in the negotiations for the latest contract?
I was at many of the negotiations, not all, but I was there at many of the times being at the table. Yes.
Are you aware that the HSTA requested up to 22 years of prior experience to be counted?
And I'd have to go back and look at some of the details. I don't, there was numerous proposals that were on the table. I don't remember every single one off the top of my head.
Are you not the head of talent management? Sorry, that's a bit aggressive. Are you responsible for negotiations? Are you the department head supervisor for negotiations that happen between the employer and the exclusive representative?
So I'm part of the bargaining unit team. We do have a chief negotiator in the Office of Talent Management that handles, you know, the negotiations. I was part of the team though, yes.
Are you briefed on what happens when you're not there?
Yes, we do discuss, yes.
And is it your position that you don't know if the union asked for up to 22 years of prior experience?
So I'm not saying yes and I'm not saying no. I said there was many proposals that were on the table. I would have to go back and look at all of the exact proposals. Off the top of my head, I can't recall that exact one at this moment.
Am I allowed to reference prior testimony in today?
Prior testimony from what?
Ms. Usherman stated that they asked for this in the latest contract negotiation.
You can ask Mr. Bacon. I think he's already answered that.
I guess you're
He
right.
doesn't remember or doesn't recall.
Doesn't recall. Okay. Let me look to see if I have any other topics I haven't touched. Hmm. The compression fix is a policy created to address teachers' wages, correct?
Compression fix was really an opportunity for those that did not receive step increases to decompress them. Yes.
The CBA requires that there be negotiations between the DOE and HSTA when it comes to wages, correct?
We are going to look at adjusting the salary schedule or the dollar amounts in each box of the salary schedule, then yes, we would need to negotiate that with the HSTA and the state.
Sorry to jump around before I forget this. I want to look at my step one grievance decision, which is RE2. Lawyers. E26. Is it Is it true that your department worked with the Office of Collective Bargaining and in the creation of the compression fix?
Yes, we worked with Office of Office of Collective Bargaining, Office of Budget and Finance. We consulted with them on the implementation of this moving forward, yes.
Did they express to you a position? Or did OCB express to you, what was the position that OCB expressed to you in your collaborations?
Objection, vague and ambiguous position about what?
All right, what position did OCB give you with regards to your planned implementation of the compression fix?
So after the bill was passed through the legislature, signed by the governor, in order for us to move forward with it, we did work with the HSTA to develop a final plan to determine eligibility and timing of everything. After we developed the final plan, Office of Collective Bargaining and Office of Budget and Finance really needed to know about costing and what this was going to actually cost the state and what was it going to cost the department. So we needed to give them numbers of who would be eligible, not eligible moving forward, so that their staff could also cost this out to move forward, so that when we did ask money, when we did put in the request to Budget and Finance and the governor to release the money, that we knew exactly how much money to have released.
Did you work with them before the bill was signed? Did you work with them during the did you work with them during the creation or during the planning, not the execution after things were signed and things were in motion? Did you work with them before in the planning phases of the compression fix?
My recollection is that we mainly worked with them after the final plan was developed. They really wanted to know costing and how much it was going to cost the states, so that we could then move forward with having the money released to be able to implement the compression adjustments.
Are you aware that the Office of Collective Bargaining was against SB 2819?
Yes, I'm aware that they did put in testimony that they were opposed to it, yes.
And the same thing with DNF?
That is correct.
Why was OCB opposed to SB 2819?
They were opposed to it, I think mainly because it didn't follow the normal process of, a plan being developed and going through the negotiations process and then asking for the money. Basically, what was happening is that the money was allocated first and then the plan was finalized and developed.
And same question for the other group.
My understanding, it was similar concerns.
So it was the position. That's fine. Are negotiations a difficult thing to set up?
I don't know what you mean by difficult.
If you want to request negotiations from the HSTA, how do you do it?
Well, both parties would need to agree to negotiate, but also part of the negotiation process too involves, that the union needs to get involved in it too, because basically the governor has 3 votes in the negotiation process. The union has 2 votes the Board of Education has 2 votes in the process, and the superintendent has 1 vote in the process. So it is a multitude of people that need to get involved when it comes down to setting up the negotiation process.
has the difficulties of setting up the process ever stopped the department from doing it before? From initiating a request?
Typically, the state office of collective bargaining is typically the leader of the process when it comes down to negotiating for the state.
But has the department ever wanted to request a negotiation and was unable to request a negotiation because of the difficulty involved?
Not that I can think of, but I've only been in the position a few years.
Were you aware of OCB's and BNF's opinions about the creation of this process and how it was backwards while you were forming the compression fix?
I was aware of OCB's and BNF's testimony in opposition to the process. Yes, it was.
Mr. Reid, let me ask you, this is about 4 o'clock. Do you have much more
I
questions with Mr. Bacon?
don't think so. No.
Do you estimate how much longer you would take?
I'm pretty much done with that line. I may. $10.
Mr. Alapa, Mr. Takei, the representation is, Mr. Reid has approximately 10 more minutes of questions. Do you want to continue? Or would you like to recess for the day?
For me, I I just have a couple of questions, so it won't be long. So if he does keep it to 10, I think we can, at least for my portion, I can't speak for the employer. You can finish before 4:30.
Since Mr. Bacon is on my witness list, I won't be asking any questions at this time. So if he's about 10 minutes and he only has a few minutes, I think it would be fine to continue.
You're okay with continue? Okay, Mr. Reid, continue.
And did the knowledge of their positions have any weight in your determination not to negotiate repricing?
I think we were following the legislative bills closely and following the legislative process as we were moving forward with this process.
No more questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Reid. Mr. Alapa?
Mr. Bacon, you recall you were asked about the 121 million that was budgeted for the repricing. You recall that testimony?
Yes,
The estimated cost of the repricing or compression fix was what, 55 million?
somewhere in that range, yes,
And that was per year, correct?
that is correct.
And that budget was for a 2-year, that was a 2-year budget, correct?
It was, yes, for the 2 years.
So it was 55 million for year 1, 55 million for year 2, for a total of 110 million, correct? Approximately.
Approximately, yes.
And so the remaining, there's approximately 11, give or take, million remaining after the cost of compression fix, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
And
that did
generally-
check.
And so you testified there was also a cost for the 21 hours of the special development classes.
Yeah, the 21 hours of professional development,
I'm sorry, it's not special, professional development.
correct,
And you estimated that that was about 13 to 15 million.
somewhere in that range, yes.
And so whatever was remaining from the budget, the 2-year budget, that was used to pay for that, but that didn't cover everything, correct?
I would have to go back and talk to our CFO on the exact dollar amounts. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, but generally, 110 million for the repricing, 13 to 15 million for the professional development, correct?
Yes,
And so just based on those general numbers, that's about 123 to 125 million, correct? Just in the
I
ballpark.
think so approximately.
And the budget was for 2 years is only 121 million approximately, correct?
The budget proviso did say 121 million, yes.
And you testified today that you actually report to the superintendent, correct?
That is correct.
So the superintendent is the ultimate decision maker on policy decisions such as what vehicle to use for compression fix. That's the superintendent's decision, correct?
Ultimately, it falls under the superintendent.
So if the superintendent has some reasons or factors that he or she considered, whatever vehicle they decided to use, that's a question for the superintendent, correct?
Correct.
That's all I have. Thank you.
I can't remember Mr. Bacon's availability for tomorrow.
He is available from
I can be
9 a.m.
Mr. Bacon, if you can return at 9 a.m., Mr. Reid gets to follow up on questions and the board members may have questions also, okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, any other issues that any of the parties want to raise before we adjourn? Mr. Reid?
Just maybe as a housekeeping thing, I would like, because the cloud upload of each hearing, the video for the October 24th hearing didn't, the file is there, but there's nothing in it, it's empty. I would like a copy of that. I brought a flash drive, you could copy it onto that. Aside that's only housekeeping, I just want a copy of that.
Okay.
Other than that, no.
And can I ask you, Mr. Reid, who would be your witness after Mr. Bacon?
After Mr. Bacon, no more. For this. For this half of, well, if they're gonna insist that I speak to Keith Hayashi about this, then I need to call Keith Hayashi.
I'm gonna object to that. I'm not insisting on anything. It's his case. Or their case, they can present however they want. And
Well,
board member, there's 25 minutes left, I think. If they want to finish up with Mr. Bacon and rest their case, I have no objection.
Shut down machine.
Yeah, I appreciate your suggestion, Mr. Alapa, but there's some technical things that we have to deal with. So I prefer that we adjourn now. Mr. Reid, it's up to you, who you want to attempt to call as a witness.
we got a lot of I don't knows and I don't remembers. And if the top of the food chain is Keith Hayashi and if he's the ultimate decision maker and Mr. Bacon said, I don't know, and I'm not sure, and I don't remember a great deal in this testimony, I'm not against. I'd call him.
Well, we can take that matter up because there's going to be issues. I don't know if Mr. Hayashi was even named on a witness list. And also at this point, there's no subpoena for Mr. Hayashi. So that's something you may want to discuss with Mr. Takei regarding his availability. Anything else from you, Mr. Reid?
No.
Mr. Takei? Any issues you want to raise?
No.
Mr. Alapa?
Nothing, thank you.
Then we're going to stand in adjournment until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Thank you.